Hello and welcome to Wild Earth Ways. I'm Kat, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the decks and books that I've been using in this month of May. So this is a monthly reflections video. I really enjoy watching other people's monthly reflections videos where they share what they've been reading and the decks they've been using each month, and getting a little insight into people's practices and experiences. So I wanted to join in with this and really share some of my practice from this month and what I've been learning. So I'm going to start with books. This is my first monthly reflections video, so I'm still figuring out the format. And I'm going to start with books today. So in May, I read these two books related to tarot by Rachel Pollack. So Rachel Pollack is a well-known and well-loved teacher of the tarot. And this book, 78 Degrees of Wisdom, was published in 1980 and is familiar to many of you, I'm sure, as a classic of tarot teaching and wisdom. And I hadn't actually read it up until now. I felt that I have read quite a few books on tarot and that I would probably already be familiar with the ideas in this book, and so that I didn't need to read it. But I was wrong. So when I decided to pick this up and go ahead and read it, I wasn't really sure what to expect, but it really taught me a lot and helped me to see tarot in a different way. So Rachel Pollack's perspective is to share how the tarot is a kind of map to a spiritual journey, especially the major arcana. She looks at the major arcana as a sequence that she divides into 3 different stages on a journey of spiritual awakening. And a lot of that is to do with resolving dualities and coming into a sense of wholeness and completion. Her perspective is very much informed by numerology and also by Kabbalah. She draws all sorts of connections between the cards, which were fascinating to me. And I actually think I will do a separate video in which I go in depth into the Smith-Waite deck along with Rachel Pollack's teachings about those cards, because it was so fascinating. The section on the major arcana is especially interesting. The minor arcana, a little less so. It's a kind of card by card approach, but she does have this interesting perspective about gate cards, which are cards that are sort of teaching a new sense of awareness and have a certain quality of silence and strangeness. So, for example, the 6 of Swords would be a gate card, or the 10 of Pentacles, that really draw us into a new way of seeing and thinking. So yes, like I said, I think I'll probably dive into this in depth in another video, but I'm really glad that I did read this month. I also read this book, A Walk Through the Forest of Souls, which was published this year. Sadly, Rachel Pollack passed away earlier this year, and she has left us with some amazing teachings. So I'm really grateful to have been able to explore those this May. A Walk Through the Forest of Souls is different than any other tarot book which I've read before. She uses the tarot to dive deep into philosophical, spiritual, religious questions, and she's very inspired by mysticism, by Kabbalah, by her own explorations of Christian and Jewish teachings. She actually then uses the tarot to teach ideas about those topics. So she will ask the tarot questions about religious topics, like the creation of the world, for example, and gives accounts of those readings in this book, which I was not expecting, and I was a little bit thrown by. Like I'm still processing what to make of what she did with the tarot, but she really uses it in a very different way than I've become accustomed to, and I really enjoyed her perspective. So again, I think I'm probably going to make a separate video on these two books together to get sort of into what she's teaching in these books. So those were the tarot books I read. I also read a few other books. So I read a couple of novels. I read this one, My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. Elena Ferrante is an Italian novelist, and this book was published in 2012 and has been much praised, widely acclaimed. And I don't know why I waited so long to read it. I thought it was wonderful. I loved it. It's spoken by a young girl growing up in a poor neighborhood of Naples in the 1950s, so still in the shadow of the Second World War. And her relationship with her best friend is a very charismatic, intelligent, and fascinating individual. And it was a little slow to get going, but once I got into it, I really found that it transported me into this place, the dilemmas of this young woman as she was growing up and becoming more estranged from her family's experiences as she was kind of going further with her education than they had been able to. And so I have already bought the second one in this series. There's 4 books in this series, and I'm going to be continuing with this series in the future. The next novel which I read this month is this one, Our Wives Under the Sea, which was written by Julia Armfield, and it was published last year. Now, in this novel, the first narrator is a woman whose wife has just returned from a submarine trip, and this was a trip that was expected to last a few weeks, but in the end it lasted over 6 months because of it going wrong. And when her wife returns, she is very strange, acting very strangely. And the novel also then is split, also tells the perspective of her wife in the submarine and their experience there under the water. And it's a love story, but it's also really about grief, loss, isolation. And to be honest, I didn't enjoy this book. I found it very bleak and really quite depressing. And also I had this problem that this is literary fiction. I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy fiction as well as literary fiction, and this book contains weird things, but it doesn't really have a system or a reason for those weird things happening. And as a fantasy and sci-fi reader, I find this a little frustrating, that when you're reading fantasy and sci-fi, when there's weird stuff happening, it's within a world in which it in some way makes sense. But sometimes in literary fiction, when weird stuff is thrown in, it's almost just for the effect, and we don't really have a proper explanation for why it's happening. And I found that quite frustrating about this book. So I probably won't be holding on to this one. So the next book I finished in May, I'd actually started it before May, is this book by Lucille Clifton. It's her selected poems, and it's titled How to Carry Water. It was edited by Aracelis Germay. I loved this book. Lucille Clifton, I'm sure, is familiar to many of you. She was a great American poet. She was born in 1936. She passed away in 2010, and she wrote many poems over her lifetime, and on themes of love, family, experiences as a Black American woman in the 20th century, And her voice is just astonishingly clear. It moved me to tears frequently. I found her vision so powerful and so lyrical as well in her expression. I think rather than me trying to explain how wonderful this book is, I think we'll just read one of her poems, which may resonate with people who enjoy tarot and these topics. So this poem is called Water Sign Woman. I think she published it in 1990. The woman who feels everything sits in her new house, waiting for someone to come who knows how to carry water without spilling, who knows why the desert is sprinkled with salt, why tomorrow is such a long and ominous word. They say to the feels things woman that little she dreams is possible, that there's only so much joy to go around, only so much water. There are no questions for this, no arguments. She has to forget to remember the edge of the sea, they say, to forget how to swim to the edge. She has to forget how to feel. The woman who feels everything sits in her new house, retaining the secret the desert knew when it walked up from the ocean, the desert, so beautiful in her eyes. Water will come again if you can wait for it. She feels what the desert feels. She waits. So that's Water Sign Woman by Lucille Clifton. I find that imagery so moving and so resonant. This poem actually really reminds me of the star card in the tarot, except that the woman isn't able to fulfill that self as the star. She's holding the water in. It's not to be spilled. And the desert is waiting, as she is waiting to be who she could be. I actually think also the poem on the opposite page is really beautiful as well, and I'm going to read this one too because it's very short. So it's called Photograph. My grandsons, spinning in their joy, universe keep them turning, turning, black blurs against the window of the world, for they are beautiful, and there is trouble coming, round and round and round. So you can get a sense there of Lucille Clifton's voice. So powerful, so empathic and compassionate and full of vision. So I strongly recommend this to anybody who enjoys poetry. There is a complete edition of Lucille Clifton's work, which I may sometime get, but I did quite enjoy this selected poems as a way to dive into her work in a more manageable way. And I think that the editor did a really great job of selecting the poems. From what I can tell, it really provided a sort of wonderful journey through Lucille Clifton's poetry. So those were the books that I read during May, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about the decks which I used during this month. So I've been doing a practice where I pick a deck each month and draw cards from that deck over the course of the month. But the month is actually, it begins with a new moon and continues to the next new moon. So that meant that when May began, I was already using this deck, the Smoke, Ash and Embers. So what I do is towards the end of the day, draw a card, not every day, but when I feel that it would be of benefit, and draw a card and then reflect on that card and what it has to teach me for this day. And the Smoke, Ash and Embers is created by Stephanie Burrows and Adam Alders, and it's a dragon deck. In my video on spring decks, I talked about why I wanted to use this deck in spring. And it was really because the deck has, for me, quite a spring-like energy. It has these dragons, but they're not huge dragons. They're quite small, and so they seem sort of young and vibrant to me. And yes, I really enjoyed working with this deck a lot. At first I found it a little bit disappointing. It took me a while to connect with it. The reason was that when I drew a card, I tended to be looking at the meaning and then just thinking about what I know of the meaning of that card. So if I drew temperance or strength, I would just think about what those cards mean to me in general. And I wasn't particularly looking at the imagery of this deck specifically. So say I drew the world, it would just make me think, okay, fulfillment, completion, a sense of belonging. But I wasn't necessarily looking at what's happening in this image or learning from this image about my sense of the world. And then a shift happened. So what actually happened was that during the month of May, there was an outbreak of violence where I live. So I live in Israel, and there was a increase in violence in the conflict with Gaza. So a lot of rockets were sent into Israel. About 1,000 rockets were actually fired into Israel, and at the same time the IDF was attacking targets in Gaza. And what happened is that the schools here were closed, and I had to work from home as well, and we were supposed to stay close to the bomb shelters while the rocket attacks were taking place. And this was the deck that I was reading at that time. And I've discovered in this deck that it had some qualities that really helped me with this experience. I mean, I don't want to really go into the politics of the situation or what I think of the situation in general. It's just to illustrate that when I was using it, there was a situation happening that made me feel unsafe, and my family was unsafe. The kids were sleeping in the bomb shelter, and so on. And also a sense of uncertainty and lack of control over my life at this time. And I think that this can happen for many reasons in people's lives. So my case may not resonate with you, but perhaps a similar situation or emotional situation may happen of a sense of lack of security due to ill health, problems with work, problems with family. These can all sort of throw us in our journeys and create that sense of basic instability. And I found that this deck was actually a really wonderful companion at this time because, for a start, it's balanced. It does contain dark cards. It contains cards which refer to conflict and suffering. And I drew such cards and thought about those messages. At the same time, it has a really beautiful energy overall in this deck. So it really felt, well, for a start, there's an element of escapism. You're going into a different world in which, the kind of the human troubles that you're experiencing in this world are not directly represented. Beyond that, though, I did feel that it felt like a kind of a hand to hold, and there was a sense in which it wasn't going to confront me with anything too difficult, and it was feeling good intent towards me, towards the world in general and all of us. And I felt the sort of, the kind of the good intent of this deck. So even when there is dark imagery, it has a sense of empathy, a sense of compassion, and a sense also of there being other sides to the story. So I really appreciated this deck in the month of May as that was happening, and having a sense of sort of like a safe place to go to in my tarot practice at that time. So that was the Smoke, Ash and Embers, which I really enjoyed a lot more than I initially expected to, and I certainly hope to return to it in the future. So once the the new moon came, I switched up to my next deck, which is this one, which is the Universal Weight, published by US Games. And this is the version of the Smith-Waite deck, which has been redrawn and coloured in coloured pencils by Mary Hanson Robbins. And it's a beautiful deck. I can't really express how much I love this deck, actually. I really have enjoyed using it and reading with it. And it's been wonderful to return to this deck, having read the Rachel Pollack book, The 78 Degrees of Wisdom, because it's really helping me to see different aspects of the cards which perhaps I had overlooked or forgotten. And I find that the coloration really helps me to see very clearly everything that's happening in the images. So, for example, I can see that the magician's belt is a snake, for example. Many images really come to life. So I'm still using this one. This one will take me into June, and when the new moon comes, I'm going to be switching over to probably Pagan Otherworlds. I'll see how I'm feeling. I'm a little bit intimidated by Pagan Otherworlds, but if I'm up to it, that's the deck I will be moving on to. So this month I also bought 2 new decks. I don't buy decks every month, but this month I bought 2, and they are the Terra Oracle is the first one. I'll talk about this one first. This is an independently published deck. The creators are Lucas Keown and Lindsay Cummins. And I apologize if I said their names incorrectly. So I got this one from Etsy. It's a animal deck. So these are the backs, and here you can see every card is a pen and ink drawing of an animal, and it has the animal, the name of the animal, and a keyword. So here we see the coyote with grit, the cicadas with rhythm, the bull with dedication. The range of animals is really wide. It doesn't belong to just one ecosystem. It ranges all over the earth. And I bought this deck because I wanted a really earthy animal deck. So I do have one other animal deck, which is the an animal oracle, which is Kim Kranz's Animal Spirit, Wild Unknown Animal Spirit. And I do really love that deck, but it does feel, this one feels more earthy. It feels more grounded in the ecosystems and the physicality of these animals. And then that may partially be because of the kind of the green backings, and the name of the deck, Terra, is the Roman equivalent of Gaia. And yes, I really also enjoy the writing in the guidebook. In the guidebook, they have some interpretation of the cards from the point of view of what the animal is teaching, but it also includes information connecting it to the ecosystem that it lives in. So other animals that connect to it in the deck and where it lives in the world. So it's a really nicely written guidebook as well. So I've only just begun exploring this deck. This is not meant to be a review. I will explore it more, and in the future bring it back on to a video and talk about what I've learned. But I really find it very beautiful. Like this one, for example, the Moon Jelly, Simplicity. That's just lovely. And something I have been doing is when I draw a card is also thinking of what the equivalent card in the tarot could be for the message of the card or the energy of the animal. So it feels like there are 100 animals in this deck, 100 cards, and it feels like a kind of council of different animals gathered to share their wisdom and from whom we can learn. And it's as though the different animals have different gifts. And it's like that also with the tarot. Different cards in the tarot carry different gifts. And so that's something that I've been thinking about and will continue to think about as I explore this really fascinating deck, Tarot, an oracle deck. So the other deck I bought this month is this one, Sea Soul Journeys Oracle Cards, which says connect with the healing power of the ocean. Now, I saw this deck on Lisa Papez's channel. She was doing a video on dupes. So she was talking about the Flow Tarot, which is a sea photography or water photography deck. And this was the one that she held up as a mass market alternative if you're not paying indie prices. And when I saw this, I was just blown away. I thought it's just so beautiful, and I'm so thrilled that I saw her talk about it. I'm so grateful to her for sharing that deck, because this deck is just gorgeous. It's completely gorgeous. It's created by Pippa Best. And yes, first of all, the sea is very important to me, and I was thinking about it especially this month, because this month, May, we took our first trip to the sea where I swam in the sea this year. So I'm not one of those impressive people who swims in the sea all year round. I like it to be warm when I'm going to swim in the sea. So this month was the first month where it was warm enough for me to go sea swimming. But over the course of the summer, I'm sure we will be swimming in the sea very often. It's a little drive for us from where we live, but it's worth it. The kids love it so much, being on the beach, playing in the waves. And I love to go swimming in the waves and immerse myself in the water. The sensations, the sound and the smells and the feel of the sunshine. It is a very powerful experience to immerse yourself in the sea. You really feel the strength and power of nature, and it's a kind of homecoming. We as animals emerged from the sea. We still carry the sea in our cell, set at a cellular level, in the salty water that runs in our blood. And I feel that very strongly when I'm there, and I think that many people do. And in the guidebook, Pippa Best talks about this, and her approach in the Oracle deck is very special because she has based it on meditative practices. So it's an incredibly peaceful and supportive deck. I'll show you what I mean. So each card has a photograph of the sea, and then it has a keyword, and it has a blessing. So here we have faith. May trust steady your fears. Curious. May you open and explore. Journey. May you seek adventure. Resilient. May your soul weather the storms. I think she's done an amazing job creating these different blessings. I love it. And I much prefer this than having an instruction, you know, where sometimes on Oracle decks you get given something that you have to do. And I have quite a lot to do. I have a full-time job, kids, and like everyone, a busy life. And so I don't really want to be given more tasks. I really appreciate receiving these intentions though. And what she's done is she's used the kind of language that we use in meditation. So these really remind me of loving kindness meditation, metta meditation. I've been practicing meditation for very many years. It's a very important part of my life. And in loving kindness meditation, you think of a person or a group of people to whom you wish to send good wishes. And you think words like, may you be happy, may you be safe and protected from all dangers, may you know ease and well-being, and so on. And what I feel that she's done is she's kind of created a metta meditation in a deck in which the ocean is sending you loving kindness. And that's how it feels to me as I read these cards, that it's like being sent the intentions of loving kindness from nature, from the ocean, and I think it's wonderful. So this is again one I want to explore in depth. I haven't done so yet. I've just started getting to know this deck, and I want to get to know it really well over the course of this summer, and then come back to you at the end of the summer, having spent some time with the sea and with this deck, to really share the wisdom of this deck. So thank you for joining me for these reflections on the books and decks I've been exploring in the month of May. I hope you've enjoyed spending the time together. If you have, it means a lot to me if you would subscribe or like. I'm really enjoying getting started with this YouTube channel and starting to interact with people here on YouTube. So thank you so much for sharing your time. I wish you the best wherever you are, and I hope to see you again soon.